The vast city stretched out before him, glowing under the alien sky. Towers of shimmering metal and glass reached into the heavens, and strange creatures wandered the streets below. The air hummed with the sound of voices, both alien and human, and the smell of unfamiliar spices filled the air. It was the day of the grand diplomatic gathering, a rare event where humans and alien races met to discuss peace and trade. The human soldier, Lieutenant Marcus Hill, stood at the edge of the royal courtyard, his heart racing. He had always dreamed of visiting another world, but nothing could have prepared him for this. The alien planet was unlike anything he had seen in his life. The city was alive with color, movement, and mystery. But more than the city, it was the people, their appearance, their presence, that filled him with awe. Marcus adjusted his uniform, trying to steady his breath. He had been sent here to represent humanity, but he felt small in comparison to the grandeur around him. As he moved forward into the gathering hall, his eyes scanned the crowd. There were delegates from all over the galaxy. Tall beings with sleek skin, short creatures with bright eyes, and even some who floated in midair, their bodies shimmering like the stars. Then, as if drawn by some unseen force, his gaze landed on her. She stood across the room, bathed in the soft glow of the hall's lighting. Her presence seemed to command the space around her. The alien queen was tall and graceful, her posture straight and proud. Her skin was a deep shade of violet, like the night sky before dawn, and her long hair shimmered with silver strands, cascading down her back. Her eyes were the most captivating of all. They glowed with a faint golden light, and they seemed to see everything at once, piercing through the crowd to settle on him. Marcus couldn't help but stare. There was something about her that was unlike any queen or ruler he had ever encountered. Her beauty was not just in her appearance, though that was enough to leave him speechless. No, it was in the way she carried herself, calm, powerful, and yet there was something strangely inviting about her. It was as if, despite the vast distance in their stations, she saw him. A voice inside Marcus's head told him to look away, to focus on the task at hand. He was a soldier, here to make alliances, to secure peace. But he couldn't tear his eyes away. Her presence filled the room, making everything else fade into the background. And then, without warning, she began to move. The queen's eyes swept across the room, and as they did, they landed directly on Marcus. His heart skipped a beat. He didn't know why, but he felt an invisible pull, as if she was calling to him. In that moment, everything around them seemed to stop. The buzzing of voices, the shifting of bodies, it all disappeared, leaving only him and her. His mouth went dry, and before he could stop himself, the words escaped his lips, barely a whisper. "She's the most magnificent queen I've ever seen." The words were soft, meant only for himself, but the moment they left his mouth, he realized something. She had heard him. The queen's gaze didn't break. Her eyes locked with his, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Marcus stood frozen, unable to move or speak. She had heard him. She had heard his whisper, and now she was staring at him. For what felt like an eternity, their eyes remained, fixed on one another, a silent understanding passing between them. Then, slowly, she turned her body towards him, her steps deliberate. Each movement she made seemed to draw the attention of everyone around her, but it was as if Marcus was the only one who mattered. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. She was walking toward him, and he had no idea what to expect. The queen's presence grew closer, her violet skin glowing softly in the dim light. As she approached, Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he should speak, say something intelligent, something meaningful, but the words escaped him. The moment felt too monumental, too overwhelming for him to grasp. She stopped just a few feet in front of him, her eyes still locked on his. Marcus had never felt so small in his life. And yet, there was something about her gaze that made him feel seen, in a way he had never been seen before. The queen tilted her head slightly, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You find me magnificent?" she asked, her voice low and melodic. It was not a question of pride, but one of curiosity. Her tone was soft, yet carried with it the weight of command. Marcus, still stunned, took a deep breath. "Yes," he managed to say, his voice steady, though his heart still raced. "I do." She studied him for a moment longer, her eyes searching his face. The crowd around them seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in that brief, suspended moment. "I am Queen Syra," she said at last, her voice like music. "And you are?" "Lieutenant Marcus Hill," he replied, standing straighter, as if the very presence of the queen had given him newfound strength. The queen nodded slightly, as if satisfied with the exchange. "It is not often I meet someone who speaks so openly. I find that refreshing." Her words sent a rush of warmth through him. Was this truly happening? Was the queen of an entire empire standing before him, speaking to him as if they were equals? He couldn't believe it. "Tell me, Lieutenant Hill," the queen continued, "what brings you to my world and to my court?" Marcus cleared his throat. This was it. The moment he had been trained for, the diplomatic mission. He had to focus. But her presence, her gaze, made it difficult. "I come to offer peace," he said, his voice more confident now, "to unite our people, to create a future together." A flicker of something passed through the queen's eyes. It was hard to read. Was it curiosity, skepticism, or something else? But she smiled again, this time more warmly. "We shall see, Lieutenant Hill," she said. "We shall see." And just like that, their conversation began. Marcus could hardly believe what had just happened. The queen, the most powerful being on this planet, had spoken to him. And not just any conversation, she had actually asked him about himself. Her words, her presence, seemed to wrap around him, and for a moment he felt like he was in a dream. But this was real, and now he was standing face to face with Queen Syra, the ruler of a vast empire. Her gaze had never left him, and it made him feel exposed, yet strangely at ease. Despite the years of training he had undergone as a soldier, none of it had prepared him for this moment. This was not war. This was diplomacy, a quiet power that came from understanding and connection rather than fighting. And right now, in this vast alien hall filled with delegates from every corner of the galaxy, Marcus had never felt more out of place, and yet more alive. He straightened his uniform, hoping to look as dignified as possible. "I'm here to offer peace," he repeated, his voice steady, but this time with more confidence. "Humanity wants to form an alliance with your people. We believe that if we work together, we can create a future where both of our races can thrive." Queen Syra watched him closely, her golden eyes piercing through him. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she let the silence hang in the air, making him wonder if he had said the wrong thing. "The future of our people," Syra said finally, her voice calm, yet filled with a depth that made it clear she had seen more than any human could imagine. "It is a heavy thing to place into someone else's hands. What makes you think we can trust humanity?" Her words were soft, but they carried the weight of centuries. She was not speaking to him like a diplomat or a soldier. No, this was the voice of a queen, one who had faced countless challenges and threats to her rule. It was clear that she had no interest in empty promises or words without substance. Marcus paused, unsure of how to answer. He had been trained to negotiate, to build trust, but this was different. Her eyes were not the cold, distant eyes of a ruler, but the eyes of someone who had suffered and endured. They were eyes that had seen betrayal, loss, and hardship, and he could feel the weight of that history in her gaze. "I can only tell you the truth," he said after a moment, trying to find the right words. "We're not perfect, but we're willing to learn. We want peace, not just for our people, but for the future, for everyone. We've seen enough war, and we don't want to make the same mistakes again." Syra remained silent, her gaze never leaving his. She was thinking, weighing his words carefully, but her expression was unreadable. The room around them seemed to disappear. And for a brief moment, Marcus felt as though it were just the two of them, alone in a space that stretched across time and distance. Finally, she spoke again, her voice gentle but firm. "Words can be deceiving, Lieutenant Hill. I have heard many promises in my time, and yet so many have failed." Marcus felt a pang of regret. He knew what she meant. He had heard similar things from the leaders of his own world. Promises of peace, of unity. And then, only disappointment and war. But this was different. This wasn't just some meeting for politics. This was something real, something he could feel in the depths of his heart. He took a step closer to her, careful not to overstep, but also driven by a desire to make her see that he was not like the others who had failed her. "I understand," he said quietly, "but this time, it will be different. I promise you that." For the first time, a flicker of something almost like hope, passed across her face. It was subtle, but Marcus noticed it. He had seen it in the eyes of soldiers before a battle when they dared to believe that victory was possible, even against impossible odds. "I will give you a chance, Lieutenant Hill," Syra said, her voice softening just a little. "But you must prove it. Prove that humanity can be trusted." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It wasn't a promise of peace, not yet, but it was a chance. And that was more than he had expected. "I will," he said with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes." The Queen studied him for a moment longer, her golden eyes searching his face as if trying to read the truth, hidden deep within. Then she turned away, signaling the end of their conversation. But as she walked away, Marcus couldn't help but feel a strange tug at his heart. There was something about her, something more than just her beauty, more than her power. It was as if he could see the weight she carried on her shoulders, the loneliness that came with ruling an empire. He knew that she had never allowed anyone to truly get close to her, not in the way that he felt a connection to her now. The thought made him nervous. What if he was mistaken? What if this was all just a fleeting moment, nothing more than a brief connection that would fade away with time? But even as doubt crept into his mind, he couldn't ignore the feeling in his chest. The Queen had seen something in him, something beyond his uniform, beyond his status as a human soldier. As he watched her leave, the words he had whispered earlier echoed in his mind. "She's the most magnificent queen I've ever seen." And it was true. But it wasn't just her beauty that made her magnificent. It was the strength in her eyes, the wisdom in her words, and the way she held herself, even in the face of uncertainty. Marcus knew that he had just crossed a line. The line between diplomat and something deeper, something far more dangerous. And he didn't know what the future held. But one thing was clear, this was only the beginning of something much bigger than either of them could have imagined. The days following Marcus's meeting with Queen Syra were filled with tension and uncertainty. The initial exchange between them had left a lingering feeling in the air, something that neither of them could ignore. But as the dust settled and the grand gathering drew to a close, Marcus found himself questioning everything. He had been sent here on a mission of diplomacy to forge a new alliance with the alien empire, but it seemed the stakes were far higher than he had anticipated. Queen Syra, though a ruler of immense power, had shown a rare vulnerability, a crack in her armor that Marcus couldn't help but notice. He couldn't shake the memory of her eyes, the weight of her gaze that seemed to see straight through him. And yet, despite the strange connection between them, he still had a job to do. His mission was clear: secure peace, not just for humanity, but for both their people. But could he really trust that this was all about diplomacy? Or was there something deeper happening, something neither of them had the courage to admit? It was late one evening when Marcus was summoned once again to the Queen's private chambers. The corridors of the royal palace were quiet. The only sound the soft echo of his footsteps. As he walked, his thoughts raced. What did she want now? The weight of the Queen's trust and his promise to prove humanity's worth felt heavier with each passing day. When he arrived at the doors of her chambers, he was greeted by two tall guards, their expressions unreadable. They didn't speak as they stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the soft glow of alien lamps casting shadows across the walls. Queen Syra stood by the large window, gazing out at the city below. Her violet skin shimmered in the low light, and for a moment she looked almost lost in thought, as though the weight of her responsibilities were pulling her down. But when she turned to face him, her expression was once again regal, commanding. "Lieutenant Hill," she said, her voice cool but not unkind. "You have been here long enough to understand that actions speak louder than words." Marcus bowed, his head slightly, feeling the gravity of her words. "I understand, Your Majesty," he replied, "and I am prepared to prove that humanity is worthy of your trust." The Queen's eyes narrowed as she studied him. "You spoke of peace, but peace is fragile. It requires more than just promises. It requires loyalty. Loyalty that is tested in moments of crisis." She paused, as if weighing her next words carefully. "I have a task for you, Lieutenant, one that will test your loyalty not just to me, but to the future of your people." Marcus straightened, his pulse quickening. "What is it, Your Majesty? I'll do whatever it takes." Queen Syra's gaze softened, but only slightly. "There are factions within my empire that do not believe in the idea of peace with humanity. They see your kind as a threat, an outsider who has no place here. I need someone to deal with them. Someone who can prove their loyalty by making a choice." Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. This wasn't what he had expected. He had come here to make allies, to build bridges, not to fight. But he knew this was the Queen's test, and more importantly, it was his test. "What exactly do you want me to do?" he asked cautiously. "Some of these factions have begun to act against my rule," Syra said, her voice now steady and cold. "They have been gathering supporters, making plans to overthrow me. They believe that I am weak because I entertain the idea of peace with humanity. I need you to infiltrate their ranks and gather information. But there is one more thing." Marcus leaned forward, eager to hear what she had to say. "They will try to convince you, Lieutenant. They will try to turn you against me. You must resist. If you show even the slightest sign of weakness, the consequences will be far-reaching. You will not just be betraying me. You will be betraying the future of your people." The words hung in the air like a threat, heavy and final. Marcus's mind raced. The task was dangerous, and the stakes were high. But he also knew that this was his opportunity to prove himself, to show the Queen and her people that humanity could be trusted. "I won't fail you, Your Majesty," Marcus said, his voice firm. "I will do whatever it takes." Queen Syra studied him for a moment, her golden eyes piercing into him as if she were searching for any sign of doubt. But after what felt like an eternity, she gave a small nod. "Very well. Go. Prove your loyalty." With that, she turned away from him, walking back toward the window. She didn't say another word, but Marcus could feel the weight of her gaze on his back as he exited the room. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Marcus knew that time was of the essence. He had to act quickly, but also carefully. He couldn't afford to make any mistakes. If the Queen had trusted him this far, he couldn't let her down now. As he moved through the palace, meeting with informants and gathering the information he needed, the sense of danger only grew. The factions that opposed Syra were powerful, and their influence stretched far beyond the royal halls. But Marcus was determined. He knew this was his chance to prove himself, not just to Syra, but to humanity as a whole. Finally, the day came. Marcus was ready to infiltrate the rebel faction, to gather intelligence and, if necessary, take action. He knew the risks, but in his heart, he believed that he could do this. He could be the one to bring peace, not just with words, but with his actions. As he made his way to the meeting place, the weight of the Queen's trust was heavy on his shoulders. He couldn't afford to fail. Not now, not when so much was at stake. But deep down, he also knew that this was more than just a mission. It was a test of who he truly was. And with every step he took, the path forward became clearer. In that moment, Marcus understood what was truly at stake. Not just peace, but the future of two worlds, bound together by trust, loyalty, and the choices they made. The days that followed Marcus's assignment were long and filled with tension. He had infiltrated the rebel faction as Queen Syra had asked, gathering information, and all the while, the weight of his task pressed heavily on his shoulders. He could sense the danger growing around him. The rebels were skilled, their movements swift and calculated, and yet Marcus had managed to remain unnoticed. He was careful, always thinking ahead, always 2 steps away from being caught. But it wasn't the danger that kept his mind occupied. It was the Queen. Queen Syra's words lingered in his thoughts like a constant hum. Prove your loyalty. That was her challenge to him. But as the days passed, Marcus began to wonder. What did loyalty truly mean? Was it just about following orders? Or was it about something deeper, something more personal? The Queen had placed her trust in him, but could he ever truly prove his worth? And could he ever be more than just a soldier to her? He shook the thoughts from his mind, for now he had a mission to complete. The future of both their worlds depended on it. It was late one night when Marcus received another summons. This time it was not to the Queen's chambers, but to the Royal Hall, a place where important decisions were made. As he entered, the grand doors slowly closed behind him, and he was met by a scene unlike any he had seen before. The royal court was filled with tension. The Queen stood at the center, surrounded by her most trusted advisors. But her face was unreadable, her eyes cold as she addressed them. "Lieutenant Hill," Queen Syra said, her voice cutting through the silence. "You have done well. The information you have gathered is invaluable." Marcus nodded respectfully, but something in her tone made him uneasy. She had not spoken to him like this before. There was something distant in her gaze, as if the warmth he had once seen in her eyes was gone. "You have proven your loyalty," she continued, her voice firm, "and I thank you for it." Marcus could feel the weight of her words, but he didn't allow himself to react. He had done what was asked of him. He had followed orders, and now he was waiting for the next step. However, Syra's expression softened for a brief moment, and her golden eyes met his with a gaze that seemed almost regretful. "But," she said, "there is more to loyalty than following orders. Loyalty to a cause is one thing, but loyalty to a person, that is something different, something harder." Marcus blinked, confused by her words. She had never spoken to him like this before. Was she questioning him? Did she still doubt his commitment? "Your mission is not yet complete," Syra said, her tone changing again, becoming more direct. There are forces at play both within and outside of my empire that seek to destroy everything we have worked for. You have gained their trust, but there are those who will stop at nothing to tear us apart. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He had known that the rebellion was growing, but hearing it from the Queen herself made the danger feel much more real. The stakes were higher than ever. If they failed, everything would be lost. "You are my most trusted ally, Marcus," Syra said quietly, her voice filled with a rare sincerity. "But you must understand that loyalty is not just about action. It is about belief. It is about the future we can build together." For the first time, Marcus felt as though the Queen was truly speaking to him as a person, not just as a soldier. It was a fleeting moment, but it was enough to make his heart race. He had never expected to be so close to her, not like this. And yet, there it was, a bond forming between them, one that was stronger than anything he had anticipated. He nodded slowly, his voice steady. "I understand, Your Majesty. I won't let you down." Syra's gaze lingered on him for a moment longer, and in that silence, something passed between them. It was as if both of them knew that their futures were now tied together in ways that neither could fully understand. And in that quiet, unspoken moment, Marcus realized something important. He wasn't just here to prove his loyalty to her. He was here because he believed in her, in the future she represented. He believed that they could change the galaxy, together. The following days were filled with preparation. The Queen had given him new orders, ones that would take him deep into the heart of the enemy's territory. He knew that this mission would be the most dangerous yet, and the weight of the task seemed almost unbearable. But he couldn't back down now. Not after everything he had seen. Not after everything the Queen had shown him. He gathered his gear, ready for the journey ahead. The air was heavy with the promise of what was to come. And as he left the royal palace behind, Marcus couldn't help but think of Syra. What would become of their worlds? What would become of their people? But even more than that, what would become of them? As the days passed, Marcus continued his mission, staying one step ahead of the rebellion's forces. He had learned their plans, and he knew what he had to do. But there was one thing that he couldn't shake, a feeling deep in his heart, a feeling that grew stronger with each passing day. He couldn't deny it anymore. He cared for Queen Syra. He cared for her in a way that went beyond duty, beyond loyalty. She had become more than just a queen to him. She had become a symbol of hope, of a future that was worth fighting for. And for the first time in his life, Marcus Hill knew that he wasn't just fighting for his people. He was fighting for something more, something that had the potential to change everything. In the quiet moments between his missions, Marcus found himself thinking of the Queen. What would happen when this war was over? Would they be able to build the future they had talked about? Or would it all fall apart, like so many empires before them? But he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't ready to give up on that future. Not yet. Not while there was still hope. And so, he pressed forward, one step at a time, toward an uncertain future that held more questions than answers. But for the first time in a long while, Marcus felt a sense of purpose. Whatever happened, next he was ready to face it. Marcus had proven his loyalty time and time again. He had infiltrated the rebel factions, gathered the intelligence the Queen needed, and stood by her side as a trusted ally. But as the days turned into weeks, something inside him began to shift. What had started as a simple mission had turned into something far more complex. He had known from the beginning that the stakes were high, that his task was not only important for the future of humanity, but for the future of the entire galaxy. He had made a promise to Queen Syra, and he had every intention of keeping it. But now, he realized that his mission was no longer just about peace, or loyalty, or duty. It was about her. Queen Syra had become more than just the ruler of an alien empire. She had become someone Marcus cared for deeply. He hadn't planned for it, hadn't expected it. He had come here as a soldier, a representative of his people, and yet somewhere along the way, he had fallen for the queen. Every moment he spent with her, every conversation, every glance, made his feelings for her stronger. He had seen the vulnerability beneath her powerful exterior, the loneliness she carried with her, the weight of her crown. And in that weight, he had found a kindred spirit, but he couldn't ignore the reality of their situation. She was a queen, and he was a soldier. Their worlds were too different, their paths too far apart. He had no place in her life beyond the mission. He had always known that. And yet, the more he tried to push his feelings away, the more they seemed to grow. One evening, after a long day of strategy meetings and preparation for the final push, against the rebels, Marcus found himself alone in the royal garden. The moonlight cast a soft glow over the plants and flowers, their colors vibrant in the night. The air was cool, and for a moment, the world felt peaceful. He wasn't expecting anyone, but as he stood there, lost in thought, he heard footsteps behind him. Turning around, he saw Queen Syra approaching, her figure illuminated by the soft light. "Lieutenant Hill," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I need to speak with you." Marcus nodded, trying to calm the flutter in his chest. "Of course, Your Majesty." Syra stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. "You have proven yourself time and time again, Marcus. Your loyalty, your courage. Everything I asked of you, you did. And now, we stand at the edge of a new beginning." The weight of her words hit him harder than he expected. The rebellion was nearly crushed. Their forces had already begun to retreat, and soon the war would be over. The future Syra had dreamed of was within reach. But the closer they came to victory, the more uncertain Marcus became about his place in that future. "Your people will be safe," Syra continued, "and I will keep my promise to you. Peace will come, not just for our people, but for humanity as well." Marcus looked down, his heart heavy. "And what about us? What about me and you?" Syra's expression softened, her golden eyes full of understanding. "You've done everything I asked of you, but now, Marcus, you must choose your own future. You must decide what it is that you want." His heart raced. He hadn't expected this, hadn't expected her to ask him the very question he had been trying to avoid. He had always known that his role here was temporary. Once peace was achieved, he would return to Earth, back to his people, and his time in the Queen's service would be over. But now, as Syra stood before him, her presence filling the space between them, he realized that he didn't want to leave her. He struggled to find the right words. "I never expected to feel this way. I came here to help, to do my duty. But somewhere along the way, I began to care for you, more than just as my queen, but as someone He stopped himself, realizing how exposed he had just become. The queen's expression remained calm, but something shifted in her eyes. She stepped closer, her voice soft. "I know, Marcus. I've felt it too." His heart stopped. "But I'm just a soldier. I'm not fit to be—" She cut him off, her hand gently resting on his arm. "You are more than that. You have shown me more loyalty, more courage than any other being I have ever met. And in you, I see a future where we can build something better, together." The words hung in the air between them, full of promise and possibility. For the first time, Marcus could see a future with her. Not just as a soldier, but as someone who could stand by her side as an equal, as a partner. But doubts still lingered. What happens after all of this? After the war ends? After the peace treaty is signed? I don't belong here. I'm from Earth. My place is with my people. Syra's eyes softened. Your place is with me if that's what you choose. I cannot promise you that it will be easy. I cannot promise that we will not face more challenges, but I can promise that you will never be alone. Together, we can face whatever comes. Marcus felt a sense of peace wash over him. For the first time, he understood what she was offering. It wasn't just a future of peace between their people. It was a future where they could be something more, something beyond duty and loyalty. It was a future where they could build something real. He reached out, gently taking her hand in his. I choose you, Syra. I choose this future. A small, warm smile appeared on her lips. And I choose you, Marcus. In that moment, everything changed. The weight of the galaxy, the fear of the unknown, all of it seemed to fade away. What mattered now was that they had found each other, and together they would face whatever came next. The future was uncertain, yes, but for the first time, Marcus felt as if he was exactly where he was meant to be. The rebel factions had been defeated, their leaders captured, and the remnants of their forces scattered. The war that had threatened to tear the galaxy apart had come to an end, and now it was time for peace. The people of Syra's empire rejoiced, and Marcus stood with them, watching as the celebrations erupted in every corner of the palace. For a moment, the weight of everything that had happened felt like a distant memory. The long nights spent gathering information, the fear of betrayal, the constant pressure to prove himself. It was all behind him now. What mattered now was the future, and that future was brighter than he had ever imagined. Marcus stood by the Queen's side as the festivities carried on around them. The crowds cheered, the air filled with songs and laughter, and for the first time the atmosphere was light, free from the constant tension that had defined their days together. Yet despite the joy around them, Marcus couldn't help but glance at Syra, standing proudly beside him. Her violet skin glowed under the light of the twin moons, and her golden eyes, once filled with the burden of leadership, now sparkled with something softer. She was no longer just the queen who had led an empire to victory. She was someone he had come to love, someone who had become a part of his life in ways he had never expected. The queen turned to him, her gaze warm. "The peace is here, Marcus," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the noise of the crowd. "We have won. Our people will finally be free of the chaos and war that has haunted us for so long." Marcus nodded, but there was a sadness in his heart that he couldn't shake. This moment, this victory, should have been the end of everything. They had succeeded. The future was theirs to shape. And yet, there was still the question lingering in his mind. What now? What happened after the war was over? "I've done what I came here to do," Marcus said quietly, his voice distant. "I've helped secure peace. But now I don't know what my place is." Syra's expression softened, and she placed a hand on his arm. "You are where you belong, Marcus. You've proven your loyalty, your courage. You've done more than anyone could have asked of you. But peace is just the beginning. There is so much more to build, so much more to do." Marcus looked at her, his heart racing. She was right, of course. This was only the beginning. The real work of rebuilding, of creating a future where their two worlds could live side by side, was just starting. And yet, a part of him felt a growing uncertainty. "I never thought I'd be a part of something like this," Marcus admitted. "I came here as a soldier to serve my people. I never imagined that I would stand here next to you, watching a new future unfold." Syra smiled softly, her eyes filled with warmth. "You are more than a soldier, Marcus. You are someone who has shown the strength to lead, to make a difference. Together, we will shape that future." Her words filled him with hope, and for the first time, Marcus felt certain of his path. He had been uncertain for so long, unsure of his place in this galaxy, in her world. But now, as he stood next to her, he realized that he had a role to play, not just as a soldier, but as her partner in the future they were about to create. The sound of footsteps broke his thoughts, and he turned to see the royal advisors approaching. They offered their congratulations, praising Marcus for his role in securing the peace. But as they spoke, Marcus's gaze returned to the queen, and he saw that she was looking at him with a gentle smile, one that spoke more than words ever could. This moment wasn't just about the war ending. It was about something more. It was about the future they could build together. The advisors eventually left, and the celebrations continued late into the night. But as the crowds began to thin, Marcus and Scifi found themselves alone in the quiet garden once more. The stars above them shone brightly, as though they were marking the beginning of something new. "I've been thinking," Marcus began, his voice quiet as he turned to face her, "about everything that's happened, and about what comes next." Scifi looked at him, waiting for him to continue. "What are you thinking, Marcus?" "I want to stay," he said simply. "I want to be here, with you, to help build this new future. I don't want to go back to Earth, not now, not when I feel like my place is here, with you." A soft smile spread across Scifi's face, and she reached out to take his hand. "I've been hoping you would say that," she said. "I've been thinking the same thing." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there, hand in hand, staring up at the stars, the weight of their shared future pressing down on them in the most beautiful way. "I know it won't be easy," Marcus continued, his voice thoughtful. "There will be challenges. There always are. But I believe in this. I believe in what we're building together." Scifi nodded, her gaze steady. "Together, we can face anything. We've already proven that. Our people have already proven that. And now we will shape this future. Together." Marcus squeezed her hand, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. It didn't matter where he had come from, or what he had left behind. What mattered was that he was here, with her, ready to build something better. The future wasn't certain, but for the first time, Marcus was no longer afraid. He was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead because he wasn't facing them alone. He had Scifi by his side, and together they could change the galaxy. As the night grew darker and the last of the celebrations came to a close, Marcus and Scifi stood together, looking out at the stars. The peace they had fought for was theirs, and the future was theirs to shape. They didn't know what would come next, but one thing was certain. Whatever the future held, they would face it together.